How to get rid of suffering. In the first video, we talked about how our life is suffering. We understood that our life is suffering. Now, in the second video, we talked about what is the root cause of suffering. We understood the root cause of suffering. Now, in the third video, we will talk about how to get rid of suffering. Now, what was actually the root cause of suffering? It was ego. As we understood from the previous video, the root cause of suffering is ego. Ego is identification with the self. Ego is the identification of the self. Now, in the previous video, we did not talk about how ego is identification with the self. Ego is the identification of the self. Now, in the previous video, we did not talk about how ego is the false self. We just talked about that what is ego. Ego is identification. In this video, I will tell you why ego is false, why identification with something or anything is false. Now, what do I exactly mean by false? You thinking you are someone is wrong. It is not true. You are thinking that you are something or someone is a false belief. Ego is the false sense of self. Now, how ego is the false sense of self? Now, something to be self, it should be permanent and independent. Now, let's say you are identifying as a student. That is permanent? No, because in few years you will graduate and you will be an employee. So, student is not a permanent identity. And let's say independent. What does being independent means? It means that you have taken your own decision to be student, but have you taken that decision yourself, or was it your parents or society? So hence, being a student is not an true identity, it is a false identity. Why? Because it is neither permanent and independent. Now you have taken an identity and you are acting through that identity. Now, are you the one acting? Are you really the one doing the work through that identity? Let's say you are a student, you are doing your homework. Are you the one doing your homework, or there is a brain that received a message from another brain which is called teacher that told you to do that homework, and you're doing it because you have to pass your exams? So where is the one doing it? No one. Your brain just received the message, and if not done, it will be taken as a threat. So your brain is forcing yourself to do it. So there is no doer in here. It is just all happening. It is just in process. You are doing that homework out of fear. So are you the one doing it, or is it the fear that is controlling you to do that homework? Now, if you see this from all perspectives, from all your identities, you will realize that there is no doer in anything. Everything is just you are receiving a message, and that message is being converted. Now, if you see this from all the perspectives of your identities, nothing you are doing is actually done by you. It is due to fear or inner emptiness or happiness or desire, or something is controlling you. That is why you are doing it. It is not independent. You have no free will. It is being done outside of your control. Now, let's say even drinking water is not done by you. Your brain receives a message that your body needs water, and then you go and drink water. So who is the one doing it? Are you the one doing it? No, brain just received a message, and brain said move and go drink water. So this is done by the brain. Now, is this actually done by the brain, or is this done by evolution? Even brain is not independent. Brain is controlled by a lot of factors like societal conditioning, and evolutionary conditioning itself is not independent. It is done due to Earth's environment, etc., etc. So nothing in nature, nothing in observable universe is actually independent, is actually doing anything, is actually in control. Everything is actually connected to each other, and it is being done outside of control. It is just an overgoing process. Nothing is in control. No one is doing anything. It is an overgoing process, infinite process. So something that is interdependent cannot be permanent, because if you are dependent on something and that something changes, you will also change. Now there will be question in your mind that speed of light is always constant. Well, speed of light is also interdependent in the existence of universe. If the universe ceases to exist, will there be constant speed of light? No, there will be no light. So even the speed of light is not in constant. So if everything is interdependent and temporary, how can you say that you are someone or something? How can you identify as something? How can you say there is an self? How can you say that you are just body and mind, that you are a human being, that you are a student, that you are a father, that you are a sports person, that you are a teacher, etc.? If nothing is permanent and independent, how can you say that you are something? Because to be an self it should be permanent and independent. Because for self to exist, there should be something permanent and independent. But as we know, there is nothing permanent and independent. Now, what does ego say? Ego says that you are this or that there is an self and that self is this or that. Now, this is an false idea. That is why ego is the false sense of self. You thinking you are someone is false due to there nothing being permanent and independent. Everything is temporary and interdependent, and there is no doer, hence no self. Now, how to get rid of this false idea that you are someone? How to get rid of ego? How to get rid of false identifications? Now, to get rid of ego, you have to convince your mind that there is actually no self. Now, your mind consists of two parts, subconscious and conscious. Your subconscious mind fully believes that these identities are the self. So you have to make your subconscious mind believe that there is no self. How to do that? How to make your subconscious mind believe that there is no self? Now, the one and only thing is self-knowledge. To attain self-knowledge, when you have obtained or attained self-knowledge, then your subconscious mind fully believes that there is no self. Self-knowledge is your mind, both conscious and subconscious, fully believing that there is no self. Now, how to attain self-knowledge? The process of attaining self-knowledge is self-awareness plus avidya. What is avidya and what is self-awareness? Avidya is outside knowledge of the self, like neuroscience, human behavior, psychology, and philosophy. These are outside knowledge of the self. Plus self-awareness. You apply this knowledge by being aware of yourself. That leads to self-knowledge, the knowledge of the self. That leads to self-knowledge, the knowledge of the self. So, outside knowledge, which is scientific knowledge, applied in your own life through awareness, leads to self-knowledge. Like, for example, you are studying and you don't feel like studying anymore. So, you are being aware of the discomfort that comes with studying. But with the knowledge of avidya, like with the knowledge of neuroscience, like why you are feeling discomfort and what is the core reason of that discomfort, which comes from the knowledge of avidya. So you are putting avidya through self-awareness, and this process leads to self-knowledge. Now, through self-awareness and avidya, you know why you are feeling that discomfort during studying and who is feeling that discomfort during study. So this leads to self-knowledge, and self-knowledge means atmagyan leads to moksha, liberation. So first we will understand what is avidya, and we will understand in detail the contents of avidya, and then we will understand how to apply avidya in self-awareness. Now, what is avidya? Is the knowledge of the self, but from outside, like neuroscience, human behavior, psychology, evolutionary science, and philosophy. Now, what is inner knowledge of the self? When avidya meets self-awareness, then it breeds self-knowledge, which is called atmagyan. Now we will talk about avidya in detail. Now, the first topic of avidya is neuroscience. What does neuroscience explain about the self? Now, before talking about neuroscience, let me tell you what avidya really do. What is avidya all about? Now, avidya will help you realize that there is actually no control, that whatever action I am doing is not done by me. Avidya will help you realize that. And avidya plus self-awareness, when applied in self-awareness, will lead to self-knowledge, will lead to full knowledge of no control. So avidya will help you realize conceptually that there is no self. Now you will apply that concept through self-awareness, and when you apply that in your daily life every day, then it will lead to self-knowledge. It will lead to full realization of no control, and realization of no control leads to realization of no self. Vidya will make you understand the concept of self. So avidya will make you understand the concept of no control, and self-awareness plus avidya will make your subconscious mind adapt and understand the concept of no control, and that leads to self-knowledge. So when your subconscious mind fully realizes that there is no control, there is no self, then it leads to self-knowledge, leads to liberation. So that is why avidya is very important, and avidya plus self-awareness is fully important. If there is only avidya and no self-awareness, you will not lead to self-knowledge, and then you will not be able to attain liberation or moksha. So avidya, which is the knowledge of the self conceptually, that concept applied through self-awareness to train the subconscious mind of no self and no control, then leads to liberation, self-knowledge. So Atma Gyan leads to self-knowledge, and Avidya plus self-awareness leads to Atma Gyan. So Avidya will make you understand the concept of no control, and self-awareness plus Avidya will make your subconscious mind adapt and understand the concept of no control, and that leads to self-knowledge. So when your subconscious mind fully realizes that there is no control, there is no self, then it leads to self-knowledge, leads to liberation. So that is why avidya is very important, and avidya plus self-awareness is fully important. If there is only avidya and no self-awareness, you will not lead to self-knowledge, and then you will not be able to attain liberation or moksha. So avidya, which is the knowledge of the self conceptually, that concept applied through self-awareness to train the subconscious mind of no self and no control, which then leads to self-knowledge, which leads to liberation. So avidya awareness leads to atmagyan, self-knowledge leads to liberation. Now first we will study about dopamine. How does dopamine works in our brain? So dopamine is a pleasant chemical related to learning and motivation. So what does dopamine has to do with suffering? Well, let me explain you. So let's say you achieve something, you feel very happy because achievement makes you feel happy. Now where does that happiness come from? The happiness comes from the release of dopamine in our brain. You achieve something, you feel happy. Why? Because dopamine is being released in your brain. Now how does this make you suffer? Dopamine has receptors. Whenever dopamine is being released, it is being released into the dopamine. Receptors are the things that receive dopamine. So when dopamines are being released in our brain, there are receptors present which catches those dopamines. Now these receptors have sensitivities, high and low. Why do they have sensitivity? To maintain homeostasis. Yes, I will explain you, don't worry. Let's say dopamine is being released. You have achieved something, a lot of dopamine will release. And now if a lot of dopamine will release, receptors will get overloaded. They won't be able to catch a lot of dopamine. Why? Because it can damage their neurons. Hence, they cannot catch all dopamine. So what do? They lower their sensitivity. If they lower their sensitivity, they cannot catch any more dopamines. So when something makes you happy, the brain rushes the dopamine to the dopamine receptors and they get overloaded. So they get desensitized to avoid neuron damage. Now how does this lead to suffering? When the receptors are getting desensitized, you won't feel any more dopamine, because if they are getting desensitized, they won't be able to catch any dopamine. It will require a higher percentage of dopamine than before for the receptors to receive dopamine. Let's say I achieve something, I feel very happy. So dopamine is rushing in my brain. It is going to dopamine is receptors are receiving the dopamine. Now receptors are getting low sensitivity, desensitized. They won't be able to catch anymore to protect neurons. Now it will require greater pull than before to feel the same happiness. It will require greater dopamine levels to feel the same happiness. Why? Because the dopamine receptor sensitivity is low. They won't be able to catch the same number of dopamine than before. So it will require more dopamine to feel the same experience, feel the same happiness. If the receptors are desensitized, the happiness simply runs out. That is what I meant by simply runs out. In our previous video I talked about 4 scenarios. What was the first scenario? That happiness simply runs out. And if happiness simply runs out, why does that happen? It happens because the dopamine receptors are getting desensitized. The receptors are not able to receive any more dopamine as they did previously. So you will require higher level of dopamine. So the search for dopamine again starts. Search for happiness again starts. If the happiness runs out, the search for happiness simply again starts. If the dopamine runs out, the search for more dopamine starts. So that is how dopamine and dopamine receptors cause suffering. Now we have understood how dopamine works and why do they cause suffering. This whole process of dopamine release and dopamine receptors getting desensitized is called homeostasis. Is to preserve balance in the brain, to protect neuron damage. So basically what homeostasis is, the brain is protecting the dopamine receptors. It is desensitizing the dopamine receptors to protect the neurons. So whenever a high level of dopamine is being released, high numbers of dopamine, then the brain will desensitize the receptors so that it can protect neurons. If the dopamines are high level and the receptors does not get desensitized, neurons will get damaged. So that is why this homeostasis process gets in action, and this is why homeostasis causes suffering. Now let's study dopamine in detail. Now why does dopamine gets released in the first place? Because it aids our survival. And how does it aid our survival? I will explain. Now dopamine gets released in two circuits. novelty circuit and habit circuit. Novelty means new, and habit, you know what is habit. So how does this aids our survival? So whenever something new, you experience something new which aids your survival, dopamine will be released in the novelty circuit. Now to first understand novelty and habit circuitry, we have to understand what is prefrontal cortex. So what is prefrontal cortex? Prefrontal cortex is the decision making part of your brain. When you make decisions or you plan something, your prefrontal cortex gets activated. Now what does this have to do with dopamine circuits? What does this have to do with novelty and habit circuitry? So novelty means something new. When you experience something new or when you experience something unexpected, that circuitry will get activated. In that circuitry, novelty circuitry, dopamine will be released. So like for example, you win something after a long time. For you, it is like a new experience, winning something. So dopamine will be released in your novelty circuitry. And now what is habit circuitry? As we know, habit means repetition. So when you repeat an action, that will release dopamine in that circuitry. So the release of dopamine depends on what exactly you are experiencing. If you are experiencing something new, dopamine will be released in the novelty circuit. And if you are experiencing something that you have done a lot of time, like in habit, that habitual experience will release dopamine in your habit circuitry. So what does prefrontal cortex have to do with this? So whenever you experience something new, your brain weighs its pros and cons. If it is beneficial for survival, the prefrontal cortex will judge that if it is beneficial or not. And if it passes that as a beneficial, the prefrontal cortex will push that experience or action to that habit circuitry. So now you will do that action repeatedly without being even aware. So in novelty circuit, prefrontal cortex is at action, and at habit circuitry, limbic system is at action. So what prefrontal cortex really does is, if you experience something new, prefrontal cortex will judge if it is beneficial for survival or not. If it is beneficial for survival, prefrontal cortex will send a message that release a lot of dopamine in novelty circuitry. And when that release happens, you feel very good. And due to that experience being very good and you feel happy, you again go and do that. And again prefrontal cortex judges that and sees that, yeah, this is beneficial again. Release dopamine novelty circuit again. So now this happens 3 to 4 times. Then prefrontal cortex says, now this experience has already been judged fully. This is purely beneficial. So push it to limbic system. So now that experience, you will do it unconsciously. You will not weigh its pros and cons. Like for example, your habit of rolling reels. The first time you roll reels, your prefrontal cortex was judging if it was beneficial or not. But now that process of judgment has ended. Now you do it blindly. Now you do it in behoshi or unawareness, and 5% of time limbic system is activated through central executive network. Now what is DMN and CEN? DMN means default mode network and CEN means central executive network. Now let's say your salient network receives a signal. Salient network is a part of your brain which receives signals from either outside like touch, smell, etc., or insides like thoughts or emotions, etc. So let's say your salient network receives an signal. Okay, now that salient network will dissect that signal, and after dissecting, if it finds out that the signal is very hardly related to survival, it will send that signal to default mode network, and default mode network will transfer the signal to a thought, and that thought will trigger your limbic system. Now you will feel emotions like fear, anxiety, or excitement. And when salient network dissects a signal and it finds out that the signal is related to decision making and planning, it is not like instant. So salient network decides that this signal requires long term planning, so it sends that signal to central executive network, which then activates the prefrontal cortex. And when prefrontal cortex is activated, there are very less emotions. The activation of limbic system is lessened. Salient network realizes that this signal right now doesn't threaten us, but in future plans it is necessary to think about. So long term planning. So what salient network does is it either sends the signal to DMN or CEN, and DMN turns that thought into an overly powerful emotions, and because of that procrastination, anxiety, etc. happens. And when salient network sends the signal to CEN, engages with prefrontal cortex. CN activates the prefrontal cortex so that you can make decision and planning. Now let's take an example. Let's say tomorrow is your exam, and your salient network picks up that signal that tomorrow is exam. Now that signal goes to DMN, default mode network, and now default mode network turns it into a thought of failure, that tomorrow is exam and I will fail. Now this thought will trigger limbic system, and it will trigger amygdala. It will trigger fear and anxiety. You will start feeling anxious. Now a thought comes into your mind that being anxious will not help. It will not make you pass. So you decide to focus and study. So now there's a signal in salient mind. The salient mind picked up a signal through that thought, and now that thought goes to central executive network, and that central executive network starts engaging prefrontal cortex. Then you start focusing on study. Now what does this have to do with our novelty circuit and habit circuitry of dopamine? So let's say a new experience comes. Now salient network picks up that signal, and it sees that this experience is new. So salient network decides to send that signal to central executive network, and now the central executive network will activate the limbic system, but through prefrontal cortex. Yes, novel circuitry is activated through prefrontal cortex, but novel circuitry is part of limbic system. Hence CN can also activate limbic system, but only when the experience is new. And now let's say if a signal comes in salient network, and salient network sees that the signal is related to habit, so it sends that signal. DMN is also related to like subconscious mind and habit circuitry, so it engages the limbic system, which limbic system then engages the habit circuitry. Salient network receives a message. If it's new, it will send it to C and then engages prefrontal cortex, then prefrontal engages limbic system, novel circuitry of dopamine. If the signal is of the repeated experience, it will then activate the DMN, and then DMN will activate the limbic system habit circuitry. So whenever a reward activates novel circuitry, the novel circuitry will feel a lot of dopamine. The reward will release a lot of dopamine in the novel circuitry, and whenever an experience activates habit circuitry, the reward will not release that much dopamine. But prior to engaging that activity of habit circuitry, dopamine will be released. So in habit circuitry, before reward and before action, dopamine is also released, and after reward, when reward has been given, dopamine is released. And in novel circuitry, only when the reward is given, then only dopamine is released. And that is why when you start being aware during your habits, you will see that you don't feel that much happiness. You will see that even though you don't want to do it, you are still doing it. But even doing it, it doesn't make you that much happy. But why are you still doing it? Because if you don't, it will release pain. You will feel pain. Now why will it release pain? Because you are avoiding that activity which ensures your survival. That is why it became an habit in first place. So whatever habit you have, it ensures your survival, and if you do not decide to engage in it, it will release stress chemicals like cortisol, etc. So that is why the habit circuitry is designed in a way, before that activity dopamine will be released, and during that activity dopamine will be released, but in way lesser amount. This is called homeostasis. So let's say you scroll reels. Now after reels, you will see that your receptors are desensitized due to heavy load of dopamine being released, and also the level of dopamine being released is lessened by the brain to maintain balance. So two things happens in homeostasis. One, the production of dopamine release is being lessened, and the receptors are getting desensitized. So 90 to 95% of your day, your habit circuitry and habit circuitry has a very low amount of dopamine release. So you can say 90 to 95% of your day goes very unhappily, and novel circuitry is only engaged when you experience a new experience, novel experience. And in our days, what is something new? In everyday life, everything is an habit. We do it every day, so nothing is new. So novel circuitry does not get engaged, and if it is engaged too many times, novel circuitry, even that receptors present in novel circuitry will get desensitized, and the production of dopamine in that circuitry will be lessened. So in either way, in both novel circuitry and habit circuitry, desensitization happens, and the production of dopamine also lessens. But due to habit circuitry taking over 90 to 95% of our day, our life is controlled by habit circuitry. Our feeling, mood, everything is dependent on habit circuitry. Now we know how habit circuitry and novel circuitry works. Now the question is, why does prefrontal cortex sends the activity to habit circuitry? Because in novel circuitry, prefrontal cortex is activated, and activation of prefrontal cortex requires a lot of energy for the brain. So now, to preserve energy, that activity is being sent to habit circuitry. But first, if that activity is safe or not is done by prefrontal cortex, and now it passes to limbic system to preserve energy. Now let's apply this understanding of neuroscience in those 4 scenarios that I explained in my past videos. What was the first? For the search for happiness means you are searching for a novel experience to engage novel circuitry, and during that search it doesn't mean that you're not engaging in your previous habits. All the novel experience that you have felt have now turned into habits, and that habits are also part of the search of new novelty. So during that search, old habits are still there and still acted upon, but the search is also presumed and resumed. And during that search for happiness, your prefrontal cortex is only activated when you are making an effort to achieve that new novel experience. But the rest of the time, your old habits are still there. But that old habits also create an, you can say, guilty feeling that you are not able to go for new novel experience. So this creates an conflict in our mind, which in turn creates suffering. So search for happiness contains 2 things: a repetition of habits, those habits making you feel guilty because you are not engaging in activities that will bring you novel experience. So in search for novel experience, habits are still there, but those habits still create guilty feeling. But to fight that guilty feeling, you again engage on that habits. And now let's say you do this for a long period, let's say 10 years, and now you're finally able to achieve that novel experience that you were striving for, but it simply runs out because high level of dopamine is being released in novel. To maintain balance, brain will lessen the production of dopamine and desensitize the receptors even in novel circuit. And now the third scenario was, even after achievement of novel experience, fear ends that experience. Fear ends the production of dopamine. How? Salient network receives a signal, the signal is turned into DMN, activates, then limbic system activates the amygdala, activates the fear, and that fear stops the production of dopamine in our brain, hence ending the happiness. And the last was something opposite of something opposite, like you were striving for novel experience, now opposite of that novel experience happens. So stress chemical like cortisol will be released, which will make you suffer. First scenario, your habits and your search for novel experience were both in conflicts, and even the habits were not as much fun. Even habits were making you feel like, no, this is not, I want more. And even during the search for novel experience, other novel experience were also being experienced, but those were also run out. So the search was also suffering. The search was completed, but that also turned out to be false because it was very temporary, it ran out. And the third, which was due to fear, it also was very temporary. Expected novel experience happens. This is the 4 experience of our lives, 4 scenarios of our lives, explained through neuroscience. So how does neuroscience works for a mukt person, for a liberated person? So for a mukt person, his baseline level is always high. The number of dopamine present in the brain is always fully high, and also the pool of serotonin is constant 24/7. Now what is serotonin? Is a pleasure chemical released when there is a thought of fulfillment or feeling of fulfillment or inner contentness or inner stability. That is when serotonin is being released. So for a mukt person's reward system, the reward system is just existence, and if it is just existence, the reward will pull gradual and balanced level of dopamine, and hence there will be no desensitization. There will be always a steady flow of dopamine, with serotonin always flowing in sustainably. So both serotonin and dopamine are being flown sustainably and balanced way. It creates an equanimity in your brain. It creates a feeling of contentedness. So both dopamine and serotonin flow gradually, sustainably, without desensitizing the receptors. Now the dopamine release when you achieve something is always at peak. What is peak means? High level of dopamine is being released. So if an achievement is your reward, the dopamine release will be high, and if it is high, it will desensitize the receptors. But if the reward system is existence itself, every moment is the reward, then the release of dopamine will be gradual and sustained. So the baseline level, which means that there will be high level of dopamine in the brain, but not as high as the peak when you felt through achieving something, when released through an achievement. It will be high enough to not deregulate or desensitize the receptors. Now you will say, if achieving something releases more dopamine, so that would be better than simply existing or being liberated. No, because high level of dopamine will desensitize the receptors and lower the production of dopamine later. So you will suffer also, even though the peak is high, but the later suffering is also high. Liberated person's brain, the dopamine levels are high enough to not deregulate the receptors, and the production is also high, and also the serotonin pill is constant 24/7. So I think this is way better than being dependent on external happiness or external dopamine and serotonin. Do serotonin receptors get desensitized? Yes, but not as much as dopamine receptors. So like when you achieve something, there is both feeling of contentment and happiness. So dopamine and serotonin are being released, but the release is so temporary, I mean so less time, that it is not worth at all. Like maybe for 5 minutes, next moment or wanting something better comes in your mind. Now how does one make his reward system simply existence, simply just living, no matter what is happening, just living, just breathing? It is a reward for you. Every moment is a reward itself. For that to happen, you have to gain self-knowledge. And how to gain self-knowledge? Self-awareness plus avidya. Now how does avidya and self-awareness makes your reward system simply existence? Now everything till now I have told you is avidya. The neuroscience is the philosophy, everything. So how do we make a reward system existence is also part of avidya. So we have to take learnings from avidya and apply in ourselves. So self-awareness I will tell you later, but let me tell you how this process of turning your reward system to existence happens. And me telling you this process is also part of avidya. So let's start. So you have to understand consciously every concept and every knowledge about the self, and you have to train your subconscious mind through self-awareness. So what is the knowledge? That is avidya. Knowledge is avidya. So you have to understand all the avidya and apply it in your life. Like, why am I sitting right now, or why am I speaking right now, or why am I crying, why am I angry, why am I at fear, why am I anxious, etc. You have to apply that avidya to yourself so that you can let go of the self. You have to apply the vidya to yourself so that you can let go of the self. Like you apply the knowledge of neuroscience in yourself. Like I made you understand that how the dopamine receptors get desensitized, how serotonin gets pulled, etc. How your reward system is externally influenced. So all this knowledge I will apply in myself. So avidya plus self-awareness leads to vidya. Self-knowledge leads to liberation. So avidya basically is two things. It tells you that you need to be liberated. Liberation is the best possible way of living, and also how to achieve it. So avidya tells you both, and now applying that avidya to your life is self-awareness, and that leads to self-knowledge. And what avidya tells us about making your reward system existence. So to make your reward system existence, you have to make your mind chase no happiness, no reward itself. Then only the reward system automatically become existence. So if you train your subconscious and conscious mind to believe that you do not need reward at all, then only your reward system will become existence automatically. If there is no reward you actually want, subconsciously and consciously, automatically your brain will make existence reward itself. What will make your subconscious and conscious mind make reward simply existence, or not chase reward at all? It is believing that there is no self, or the human and mind is simply just in flow of nature, or just nature. There is no self. Just simply knowing this fully, subconsciously and consciously, will make your reward system existence automatically. Because if you believe that it fully that there is no self. Subconsciously and consciously you fully believe that there is no self. Then if there is no self, why would you want any reward for yourself? Why would you want even happiness? Nothing you would want. So if the mind is fully trained in that, then the reward system will automatically be existent, because there should be any pulling factor for dopamine and serotonin. They cannot sit idly. So dopamine will flow gradually. Neuroplasticity will occur. Neuroplasticity will change the way dopamine and reward works. The novel circuitry will most probably be very rare, and if it is like activated, it will be because you experience something new, but not for survival. It is just simply experience something new. The most of the time habit circuitry will not be habit circuitry at all. Most of the time habit circuitry is at play. Your habit circuitry will change to conscious present moment. Your habit circuitry will change the rewards from habit to conscious awareness at present. So simply believing there is no self will make your reward system existence, will change your habit circuitry through neuroplasticity to simple awareness present moment. Simple present moment awareness. Now how do you make your subconscious and conscious mind fully believe that there is no self? For that you have to watch yourself from the center of no control, because if there is no control, there is no doer, there is no self. It is as simple as that. So you have to watch your every action. Watch means observe. Simply observe your every action and do not interfere with it, because if you interfere, there will be illusion of control. So you have to just simply watch your actions and let go of the illusion of control. Like for example, I am sitting and there are thoughts coming in my mind. I'm just simply observing them. I'm not like interfering or I'm judging them, or if they're bad or good. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just simply observing that, and I'm just seeing that these are the conditioning of society and evolutionary. These are evolutionary or societal conditioning. These thoughts are product of these things. There is no control in it. And if I do this 24/7, my subconscious and conscious mind will be trained to believe that there is no self, there is no control, there is no doer. So you have to make your subconscious mind, you have to train your subconscious mind to believe that there is no control, there is no doer, hence there is no self. Now you will ask that if there is no self, then why even go for liberation, why even go for mukti, why even do all this? Because if you don't, you will suffer. If you are only applying this logic when you are about to go for mukti, then apply this logic everywhere. And if you don't apply this logic everywhere, you will be a hypocrite. Because if you only apply that I do not exist, so why do I want liberation, then don't go for any achievement, don't eat food, don't drink water. Why are you even doing that? Why be a hypocrite? Why chase your desire, right? So to not be an hypocrite and also end suffering, you have to have one self, even though it is false. You have to have one self for mukti only. You have to have an lalach or greed. You have to be greedy for mukti, even the mukti is not for you. You have to be greedy for mukti. So it is like a car using an petrol. It uses that petrol to go to another petrol pump. If you are only applying this logic when you are about to go for mukti, then apply this logic everywhere. And if you don't apply this logic everywhere, you will be an hypocrite. Because if you only apply that I do not exist, so why do I want liberation, then don't go for any achievement, don't eat food, don't drink water. Why are you even doing that? Why be a hypocrite? Why chase your desire, right? So to not be an hypocrite and also end suffering, you have to have one self, even though it is false. You have to have one self for mukti only. You have to have an lalach or greed. You have to be greedy for mukti, even the mukti is not for you. You have to be greedy for mukti. So it is like a car using petrol. To not use petrol at all, it is using petrol to move to a destination, and that destination is to not use petrol at all. So you are using this greed of mukti to get rid of greed. You are having an self to destroy the self. You are having an self to actually destroy the self, to destroy the illusion of self. So you have to use one illusion, one selfishness, one greed, and to destroy the self. You are having an self to actually destroy the self, to destroy the illusion of self. So you have to use one illusion, one selfishness, one greed, to get rid of all illusions, all selfishness, all greed. You have to take one, and you can only take these things one and only for mukti. So you can only take this only at one time or only for one purpose, and that is mukti, liberation. So you have to use an illusion to get de-illusions. You have to use selfishness to remove selfishness, to become unselfish. You have to use greedy. You have to be greedy to be ungreedy. So you have to use this all, but only for one thing, and that is liberation, mukti. It's like a car using petrol to not want petrol at all or forever. So the only time you can let the illusion of control take over is when something is progressing your life towards mukti. So the rest of your day or rest of your life, you have to let go of the control, let go of the illusion of control. And at the times of mukti, when you see that this action will make you mukt or this action will not make you mukt, only that time you have to take the illusion of control, and all the else time you have to let go of the illusion of control. So you have to, as I said, have to be selfish, greedy, and even at illusion when it comes to mukti. But all the time or all the other things in your life, you have to let go of all these illusions. Only that way you can train your subconscious and conscious mind to fully believe that there is no self, there is no meaning, there is no control, there is no doer. It's just simply nature, everything is flow, everything is randomness, everything is meaningless, etc. So you have to observe your whole life without interfering. But the only time you have to interfere is when your chances of liberation or your progress towards liberation is being hindered or being magnified. That is the only time that you can interfere in your observation of your life. If you don't take control, then you will not even try to change your subconscious mind. You will not be motivated to go and achieve liberation. So you have to have one false concept to destroy that all the other false concept. And when that one false concept remains, that false concept itself get destroyed, and there at the end are no false concepts at all. Use one illusion to end all illusions, and at the end, when that one illusion remains, that one illusion get destroyed in itself. It get destroys with all the other illusions. That is how subconscious mind and conscious mind fully comes to believe that there is no self. So you have to give greedy or lalach to your subconscious mind that liberation is the best, and also watch it from the center of no self, or watch yourself like a stranger. Basically observe yourself without interference, without having an illusion of control. You have to take two contradictory ideas, and the first idea, which is the truth, that there is no control, and the second idea, there is control but for mukti. So the first idea should be 90%, and the second idea should be back of your mind. It should not be the main priority all the times. Only when mukti is being questioned, then only you can bring that to your mind. All the other time you have to let go of the illusion of control. As I said, when you train your subconscious mind, your neuroplasticity will occur. It will change your novel circuitry, it will change your habit circuitry, it will also pull serotonin 24/7. So everything will be changed, everything will be perfect, everything will feel like in bliss, nirvana. So this observation without interference is called self-awareness. So self-awareness, observation without interfering, plus knowledge of everything about the self leads to self-knowledge. Let me give you an example. Let's say tomorrow is my exam. This is my favorite example because everyone can relate with this. So tomorrow is exam. You are very anxious. Now you will observe this anxious without interference. You will see that this feeling is arising. This thought is arising of tomorrow, and you will see that why that is arising. You will apply avidya here. You will see that my need for self-worth and belonging is making me fear of tomorrow, making me anxious for tomorrow. But who is exactly at fear? Who is anxious right now? Is it me? No. It is this body and mind. It is nature. It is just happening because of these reasons, because of these needs. This is happening. There is no control. This is just happening, and I don't have to interfere with. This is just happening. There is fear. There is this thought. I cannot control it, and this is not happening to me. There is no self. There is this human body and mind. It is happening to it due to these reasons, due to cortisols releasing in mind, due to the needs of self-worth and belonging, due to survival, due to evolution, etc., etc. You will simply put avidya in that moment through self-awareness. You will observe without interfere by adding avidya to it. Like I give you one more example. You are about to be married and you are very happy. Now you will observe that this happiness without interfering. You will see that why you are being happy, because your need for belonging and love is being fulfilled. Apply the evolutionary science in it, that why humans get happy at this moment, what are these needs, what chemicals are being released. You will apply all this at that moment without interfering, without thinking this is bad or good. So this is self-awareness plus avidya applied through an example, and this constant process leads to self-knowledge, which leads to liberation, which change your subconscious and conscious mind to fully believe that there is no self, that thus that what exists is simply nature and no self, no control, no doer. Let me give you one more example to make it more clear. Let's say there is an urge. I am feeling the urge to play video games. Now I observe this urge without interference. Why am I feeling this? It is because I want to play video game. There is an urge. Why this urge is being there? Why this urge is arising? It is due to my habit circuitry calling my activity to come again, to experience that activity again. That is how my habit circuitry works. And why my habit circuitry has taken this as a reward? Why my habit circuitry has taken video game as rewards? Because video games are related to my needs. It helps me escape the stress and also fulfills my need of self-worth, because if I win in the video game, my need for self-worth fulfills. And why this self-worth is important? Because through human evolution, the more you had worth, the more chances of survival were there. So the more chances of survival, the more self-worth, the more happiness, the more dopamine will be released, and this activity provides me that. And through repetition of this activity has become my habit. So first that activity came to my normal circuitry, now it has become my habit through repetition. So that is why this urge is being aroused. My habit circuitry is asking for this activity to be played again. So as I know, all these are just happening through process of evolutionary and biological responses and reaction. I have nothing to do with this. Even this one speaking and explaining is not me. There is no control. I have no control. I do not have to interfere with anything, any of my thought. I can just observe. There is nothing to do. So as you can see, this was an example. At first this will be very hard and it will take time at first, but as you progress, as you practice, this will become very easy. At first you have to think all this avidya, but slowly all this knowledge will be ingrained in your subconscious, and once it gets ingrained in your subconscious, simply observing it without even thinking will give you the idea of no control. All this thinking, why did I think that I have no control, even the one thinking is not me? Why did I did all this? To ingrain that idea in my subconscious mind. So at first I have to tell all this. Whenever something, emotion or thought arrives, I have to tell all these things to my mind so that it gets ingrained to my subconscious. And once it gets ingrained in my subconscious, I don't have to speak any of this at all. Simply just observing it will give me the fact that no, there is no self, there is no control. Even simply observing will become a habit. It will change the habit circuitry to present moment awareness, and it will make that reward. Present moment awareness will be that reward. So your subconscious mind gets adapt to the new idea of no self, and also observation becomes an habit. When observation becomes an habit, it changes the reward system of habit circuitry to what? To present moment awareness, to simply observing. Now you would say habit is done subconsciously, you do not have control, but this observation is fully conscious. This is fully controlled. That is why I said previously that the habit circuitry does not remain habit circuitry. It changes conscious habit circuitry. So observation changes the habit circuitry to conscious habit circuitry, and also changes the reward system to present moment awareness. Basically, when you practice observation at start, it is to train the subconscious mind to believe there is no control. But as we progress, the subconscious mind simply rests, simply lessens. The activity of subconscious mind get lessened, and the conscious mind becomes fully aware, because observation is the activity of conscious mind. So if conscious mind is always there, if you observe all the time, how can subconscious mind be at play? It is at play, but very rarely. 99% of your time the prefrontal cortex is activated through observation. Prefrontal cortex is activated, so as we know, the DMN activity, default mode network activity, and also the subconscious mind, and also the limbic system, and also the amygdala will shrink. So whenever your prefrontal cortex is active, these things get shrink. So observation is the practice of activating your prefrontal cortex 24/7 and deactivating or reduce the activity of default mode network, limbic system, amygdala, and the subconscious mind. Now we know everything related to neuroscience with our lives and how it is applied to our life. Now let's move on to human psychology and human needs. I will also cover the evolutionary part of it. So I will cover the human needs and how it occurred through evolutionary science. So as we know, Maslow hierarchy law, there are 5 needs. First is physiological need, second is safety, third is safety and sense of belonging, fourth is self-worth, and fifth is fulfillment. Now this Maslow hierarchy law, one thing is wrong. The hierarchy means the first one is the most important and the last one is the least important, but this hierarchy is wrong. The last one, which is fulfillment, should be at first and everything else above it. So fulfillment should be at first. Now why fulfillment should be first? Because every action, every need, physiological, safety, belonging, self-worth, we all strive for fulfillment through them. So basically our first need should be fulfillment, not these things, because all these needs are to be fulfilled. The fulfillment should not be at last, fulfillment should be at first. We chase self-worth, we chase belonging, we chase food and water to be fulfilled. So fulfillment should be the first thing. And what makes us fulfilled? Only one thing can make us fulfilled permanently, not temporarily, permanently. Temporarily, food, water, and sense of belonging, self-worth, excretion needs, etc., etc. Temporarily, they can fulfill you, but not for long. Basically, 5-10 minutes. For permanent fulfillment, as I told earlier, avidya plus self-knowledge, self-awareness plus is equal to self-knowledge is equal to liberation. So avidya plus self-awareness is equal to self-knowledge is equal to liberation. It's the only way you can be fulfilled permanently. Now let's talk about other needs. Physiological needs. Physiological needs are basic needs like food, water, etc. All the things that you consume, like food and water, that are beneficial for energy and survival, those are physiological need. And the second is safety. Safety like and shelter or home, that is what you can say safety, or safety for future, etc., etc. That is all comes under safety. This all comes under safety. And sense of belonging. Now sense of belonging is belonging in a group or belonging in a family. Like you have a family, or you have a group, or you have a religion, like you are Muslim, Hindu, Christian, or you are from a biker gang, etc., etc. So basically belonging somewhere, that is what we call sense of belonging. And now what is self-worth? Self-worth is the need for self-image. Self-worth is a need for self-image. So worth, what does worth mean? It means what is your value. So high self-worth leads to high survival, because you have high value. If you have high value, then you are good for survival. So whoever has high value, he can survive the most. Like if you have strength, you are smart, or you have a lot of resources, etc., etc. You are capable of survival. That is worth, that is value, that is self-worth. So it comes under fourth. And now in self-worth, we look for our worth through other people's eye, or we ourselves determine how worthy we are. So there are two ways to get self-worth. First, we look through other people's opinion, and second, we ourselves determine what is our worth. Like if someone compliments me, I get happy because it boosts my self-worth. And if I achieve something, like I deadlifted let's say 250 kg, then my worth will increase. I will increase my worth through my own judgment, through my own actions. And the first one was what? I increase my judgment through other people's opinion. So there are two ways to complete this: through other people's opinion and by your own judgment. Now, how sense of belonging and self-worth attributes to survival? How does this attributes to survival? Now, if you belong somewhere, they will provide you something. So belonging in a group or family means you are surviving, means they are providing you resources which ensures your survival. And now self-worth: if you have high worth, you will most probably survive more. So these are the needs which evolution put in us to make us survive. Why did evolution put something for survival? Is evolution a thing that put survival in us? Well, let me explain you. So evolution is just a random process. So anything that survives right now, it is surviving randomly due to an cause, and that cause is also random. Now let's say human who have these four needs survive till now. Now let's say a human had another need, let's say a need to drink a lot of water and not eat enough food. So that human being will only drink water, and due to lack of food from energy from food, due to lack of energy from food, he will not be able to protect himself. So those humans whose need were mostly to drink water will not survive, and those humans who had water plus food as their needs survived. So right now the humans who are alive have all these four needs, and this is what evolution is: and natural selection, and a random process of natural selection. Nature selects randomly what will survive or what will cease to exist or what will exist. It has no meaning, it has no purpose. It is basically bunch of random process. Just like chemical reactions, us humans are also just a product of cause and effect. There was a cause, through that cause an effect was born, and that effect is human. So what was the cause? Evolution was the cause, and the effect is human. And what was the cause behind evolution? Evolution's cause behind was random natural selection. So everything in the universe is like this. Everything is random cause and effect. So human behavior is influenced by needs, and needs are influenced by survival, and survival is influenced by evolution, and evolution is influenced by random natural selection, and random natural selection is basically random cause and effect. In the end, we are just random cause and effect with no control. Everything just happens randomly. Everything is cause and effect with no control. Everything is just happening. Everything is just in process and controlless process. Everything is just in controlless process. Now, how do we apply this human behavior psychology and evolutionary science to our self-awareness, through our self-awareness in our daily life? Now let's say I am feeling anxious. I will see that I am feeling anxious. I will apply this in my mind. What will I say? I will observe this without interfering. There is fear. Why is there fear? Because it came through random cause and effect of natural selection, which was also random, and evolutionary, which caused evolution, and evolution caused survival, and survival caused these four needs, and these four needs, one need was self-worth, and now I am anxious because of my self-worth. There is no control of me. Everything is just cause and effect. So just like we did in the neuroscience part, we now did it with human behavior psychology and evolutionary science. Now we will talk about philosophy. Philosophy, what is philosophy? Bhagavad Gita is also in philosophy. So we will also add philosophy in avidya. So what does philosophy say? True philosophy says that there is no self, that liberation is the only thing that can make you free, that can make you at peace, that can make you free from all your attachment and desires and chains and suffering, etc. So philosophy is what teaches you this, that this is the way that you can achieve this. Philosophy tells us the way to live our life. So Bhagavad Gita, which is in philosophy, plus neuroscience, plus human behavior psychology and evolutionary science, added through self-awareness, meaning added through observing without interfering, can lead to self-knowledge. No, will lead to self-knowledge. So philosophy, neuroscience, human behavior psychology and evolutionary science added with self-awareness will lead to self-knowledge. So let me clarify it again to you. Avidya plus self-knowledge or self-awareness leads to self-knowledge. What does avidya tells us? Avidya tells us two things: why we need liberation and how to achieve it. And this added with self-awareness leads to self-knowledge. And what is self-awareness? Self-awareness is basically observing everything about your daily life, everything about yourself without interfering. So observing without interfering plus avidya leads to self-knowledge. Now this process of self-awareness has one problem, and that problem is your subconscious mind taking over the process itself. So when you are trying to observe while also engaging in your previous old habits, the subconscious mind takes over and your conscious mind sits back. So at that moment, observing or being aware becomes hard. So what is the solution for it? The simple solution for it is nishkam karma, which means selfless work. Nishkam karma, selfless action, helps you in two ways. It helps you in observation and it helps you fight urges of your old habits. So how does it help in observation? So when you work hard, your prefrontal cortex is activated, and when your prefrontal cortex is activated, observation becomes easy because your prefrontal cortex is already activated, and when some emotions or thoughts or urges arrive, you can simply be aware of that. And if you are doing an old habit and if you're trying to be aware, then you will simply lose awareness because that old habit simply triggers a subconscious mind and subconscious reaction, and it simply shuts off your prefrontal cortex. So that is why selfless action is necessary, or not necessary, you can say it eases up the process. And the second thing was to fight your needs. Now, if you sit just like this doing nothing, all your needs, all your old habits will scream, please do me, please do me. I want that experience, I want this experience, I want to play this game, I want to go and have fun, etc., etc., I want to dance, etc., anything. But working selflessly for an action, for an worth, or for an meaning, for an purpose, for an goal will make you focus on that, and will also make you fight your needs easy because you're focused on an work which is purely selfless. So it will help you fight your needs, and it will also ingrain an idea in your mind that something is more important than the self, which also dampens the self. So excuse me, selfless work has three benefits. First, it helps in observation. Second, it helps in fighting needs. And third, it helps in being selfless, or it also helps train our subconscious mind that the I is not important. So basically it helps in fighting needs. And third, it helps in losing the self or being selfless. How? Because if you are working for a selfless goal, you are practicing, or you can say you are practicing to teach your mind, your subconscious mind, that something is more important than the self, than the I, than the needs. So you are making your mind believe that the self does not hold any value, more value than this goal. The self does not hold more value than this goal. So you put the goal ahead, which also helps you become selfless. So selfless work helps you in these three things: observation, fighting needs, and losing the self. Basically being selfless. Observation, fighting needs and being selfless. Now, it is not necessary that you have to pick any selfless goal. You can also just observe daily your daily life, or you can also go and engage in your daily life and observe it from the center of no control, no self. But it is very hard. Most likely you won't be able to do it. Most likely selfless work eases up the process like 80%. It helps you in observation, it helps you in fighting your needs, and it also helps you being selfless. This is the goal you want, right? To achieve self knowledge, to achieve liberation. So selfless work ticks these three marks, which are very important. So selfless work boosts up the process of observation, of selflessness, of gaining the truth, of gaining liberation. That is why Krishna said, do your dharma and do not look for any fruits. So do your duty and do not look or find any reward. Do not hope for any reward. Just do selfless work. That is why it is being said like that in Bhagavad Gita. You will say you are being selfish because you want liberation. As I said before, only one selfishness is allowed, and that is to be liberated. So selfless work is not purely selfless, but it is still selfless in the sense that you do not go towards your human tendencies or human needs. You are going for liberation. You are going to lose the identification with the human body. So hence this selfishness is good selfishness, because this selfishness destroys the whole selfishness itself, even the good selfishness. Hence you become purely selfless, purely desireless. That is why practice of nishkam karma or selfless action is very important and very needed in our society. If everyone is liberated, it means everyone is selfless, and if everyone is selfless, you can imagine the world. The world will be euphoria, and that is my goal here. I want to make the world an euphoric and ideal place for peace and equanimity. Now, why have I picked this goal? Because this goal is also selfless. I want to make a peaceful and sufferingless world, and this work will make me achieve liberation sooner, as I told you why. And my plan is to spread this awareness, this knowledge, to end suffering through YouTube and many more platforms, just like Acharya Prashant. I'm very inspired by him, and I'm hoping that one day I'm able to meet and talk with him. And my plan is to spread this awareness, this knowledge, to end suffering through YouTube and many more platforms, just like Acharya Prashant. I'm very inspired by him. This selfless work improves my knowledge and also helps me in the three things that I mentioned before. So this is my nishkam karma, and this is my duty that I am doing right now. So this is all. Thank you for watching.